So this is kind of a funny story that I didn't expect, but I thought I'd share it with everybody. This bike, of course, I restored. When I restored it, I already had a spare bike I had used on the track for a couple of years. And so I was real familiar with how the suspension worked. But I didn't expect this to happen. Now, I was out riding the other day, and I hit a pothole. I couldn't believe. I thought for sure I bent the rim. Well, it turns out I didn't bend the rim. But on the ride home, I said, oh my God, the suspension on this thing, it was really getting mushy. It was like you took the fork oil out. So it kept me up that night, and I was thinking, what the hell could have happened to the fork? Did I damage it, or what could have happened? Then I remember back from the days when we used, I have two of these, I used the other one for a track bike. I remember tinkering around with this anti-dive, putting it on position 1, position 2, position 3, and it made a significant difference when you'd nail a brake from very high speed. So I said, oh, well, maybe that's part of the problem. Now, a lot of the bikes from this era had, this is an 89, by the way, but this is electronic. Some of them are hydraulic. The one on a Suzuki is hydraulic, but it's called an anti-dive. What this is supposed to do, and this one is electric, the wire runs up under the gas tank. What this is supposed to do in the technology of the day was that as you could have a soft suspension at all times, but then when you got on the brake, it would block off some of the rebound dampening, some of the dampening anyway, and stiffen up the front end so you didn't have that giant nosedive. Now on a Suzuki they had one on each fork leg, well, probably similar, but these worked hydraulically. Now modern bikes, I think what the bike companies have done as time has gone by, they've just gotten better and better forks where they don't even need this anymore. But it's nice to have this because these bikes are all historically registered. It's nice to have them as authentic as possible. So I leave this anti-dive on both the Suzuki and this other one, the Kawasaki. They both are just to keep the bike authentic looking. So back to the story, and you can't make this up. I pulled this up, checked at the hole that I hadn't damaged the rim because I really had hit a pothole. My own fault, of course. And I said, oh, I used to keep this on setting 2 to ride on a street, setting 3 to ride on a track, and 1 is basically too soft for me. It's a Goldwing. So I went to move it, and I said, oh my God, you can't move it. It might have been damaged, or maybe it's been worn out for 10 years and I don't know about it, so who knows. But I said, well, not a big deal. I have a spare bike. Let me go take the part off the other bike and switch them. Now, anybody that's ever worked in my shop or with me, or if I've helped them do things, they know I try to do things as efficiently as possible because I have limited time and I like to ride a lot and I have a lot of motorcycles. So one of the things I always try to do is if I'm going to do a job, I try to get as many things done with one disassembly as possible. So I'm going to take this apart, and I thought, well, as long as I'm doing this, I may as well put new fork oil in. I'm going to have to hang the bike. I'm going to have to pump out all the old oil, and I'm going to have to put new oil in. And when I take this off, of course, there's going to be 2 giant holes with O-rings to restrain that oil. Now I also have to measure the oil because there's a different amount of oil in each fork leg. I'm going to have to do that calculation. I luckily have the manual. So step 1 is I just took the spare one. This is off the bike that was the track bike, and take that one off temporarily. I don't know how you would go about testing that these work. It doesn't matter. I'll just swap them. It's 2 bolts, but while I'm doing this swap, I may as well change the fork oil. So it's very handy by having the factory manual. It gives you a full detail of, well, all of the possibilities, all the things for changing a fork oil, which we know, how to measure it. It's all in the manual. And of course there's a different amount if you disassemble the forks because you get out every last drop. But for our purposes, this will be close enough. And what we'll do is we'll measure the fork oil that comes out of each leg, marry it up to the manual, see if we're real close. This this bike doesn't have any leak at the fork seals. So we'll be able to measure it and put the same amount of oil in, except I'm going to put a little bit thicker oil. Recently I bought some PJ1 30 weight. I want to try that in these forks. So this will be 2 jobs, basically for the price of 1. So basically this is the anti-dive unit that came from the track bike. It's got 2 O-rings. It obviously restricts electronically. Now I'm sure, and I did the first thing that's wrong with the one that's on the bike now, I can't move the knob at all. So that tells me it might be either frozen, worn, or broken. And since this happened right after a day of hard riding with that pothole especially, I'm tending to think something in there is broken. But now there's only 2 wires going to it. So I tend to think if I was trying to restore the old one, I'd want to, when I connect voltage to this, I'd want to hear something click or change, or like a relay. But again, I'm not sure, and it doesn't matter because I have a spare part. Now I don't know if you went to buy this part off eBay or from Kawasaki. Maybe you can't even get it. That's what's nice about having a spare bike. So step 1 on the job, and this is, like I said, I'm going to try to do 2 jobs, 2 for the price of 1 here. Get the bike out under the electronic winch and first pump out all the fork oil into some sandwich bags and measure how much oil comes out. Now, because I don't want to get any oil on my very expensive Bordello rug, I just put a sandwich bag, a couple of zip ties, and a piece of tape so I can pump that oil right in. And now I can just put a little baby hole in the bag, loosen the screw, and pump out the oil. Now I want to see, and I want to carefully measure how much oil comes out of each fork leg. So this is relatively easy, and it's the way I've done just when I'm only going to change fork oil. Of course, if I was not going to change fork oil, this would be difficult because I would have to figure out how much oil I lost in doing that. So this is kind of like a, oh, there it comes. And boy, you can see it's as black as can be. Nothing unique about that, but the oil we're going to put in there is going to be crystal clear. PJ1 is just beautiful. Now, what has to happen now, and I've got to get on the bike to do it, I've got to pump the rest of it out. Whoa, coming out the hole. Oh my God, good thing I have the... Ah! Smart ass, he puts the hole right where... See? Smart! We won't cut that out of the video either. We got to show. Hey! See? And as you pump it out, now, while we're waiting, and I'll do the other fork leg off camera, while we're waiting for all that oil to drain, I have several other here. I can hear it that I'm at the end of it now, but I'll just let it drain. The longer it drains, the better. I want to get every drop of that oil out. I guess you can see why I put a towel underneath it. Now, even 15 minutes after doing both legs, I can still see it's still dripping out of there. It just takes forever. So, you know what I thought in the future, one of the things I'd do is I'm going to do this job or something similar. I'm going to let it sit overnight. Get the rest of that oil up. But boy, that stuff is black. If you only can tell, that is. So you can see even there's still a couple of drips coming out of there, but I'm going to take the bag now, carefully empty it into my measuring beaker and see how much oil came out of that fork. Then I'm going to take off the anti-dive unit and see. I'm sure there's still going to be some oil in there. So out of the first leg, a full 10 ounces, maybe a little more than 10 came out. It's almost up to the top of the Pyrex number. But anyway, that oil is absolutely full of little metal shavings. If you take it out in the sun, what happens? It sparkles like metal flake. And that's the spring rubbing on the inner tube. There's only 2 bolts and a wire connector to connect that. And again, because we're not going to try to rebuild it at all. We'll save it Just going to take the 2 screws out and take that off, and I'm sure more oil is going to come out. What a surprise. Now with that part out, of course I just have to disconnect the wire. I'm going to get brand new O-rings for this. I'll clean this all up. Let me show something pretty funny. I was looking, here's where the wire actually connects in there. Well, luckily it looks like I'm just going to be able to get my hand in there and disconnect it without having to take the tank and all the bodywork and everything off. Maybe it's my lucky day. Now the old one is off and ready to do the replacement. Now with everything wiped clean, I'm just ready to swap out this unit. There's no oil in the fork leg, so as soon as we're done with this, we'll put the screw in, tighten these bolts up, and then we'll go do the same thing to the other leg. Okay, I just have to reroute the wire, and there's some zip tie areas. But here's one thing, believe me, it's easy to forget. I always dump the bag of oil into the measuring device, and half of the time I forget the screw is still in the bottom of the bag, so good idea not to throw the bag in the garbage till you're done. Now when I clean this beaker out, and I will clean it very well, what I want to do is I want to fill this, adding maybe 1/8 of an inch to this line, because some of this is going to stay in the funnel and in the bowl here when we pour it. I want to make sure I have enough in there, but it really comes out to be, in this case, it looks like very close to what we expected, 10 ounces a side. And it says there a variance here of 4 milliliters. Well, we'll find out. We're going to put 10 ounces in each side and see what happens. And this is the oil I've been replacing all the fork oil with on all of. I'm basically going through the bikes one by one and trying to get fresh fork oil in all of them. But we'll find out how this is going to work after a couple of months of riding. Pretty obvious what the difference is. That black grinding compound that was in there, this should really make for, and because it's a little thicker oil, especially in the summer, should give us a little extra dampening. And now we'll be back to where we can adjust the forks too. Now that my trusty electric come along, I'll get the strap on the bike that'll allow me to take all the weight off of the forks. Then what I have to do, and this is really just a bolt-on, bolt-off job, I need to remove the handlebars, get at the fork tube nuts one by one. I'll do one side at a time, and put the brand new oil. Ooh, I love the look of that oil. Ooh. A lot of people just think fork oil just lasts forever and never gets gritty and dirty, and well, I'm not sure, but I like, if I have a choice, that's what I want to have in there. Now it's hard to describe just how handy this is. And we're free and we're off the ground. And when I bought that winch at Harbor Freight, 75 bucks, I had no idea how often I'd be using it. I use it all the time. Super handy tool. A really good tip, have your old towels, and we have plenty of old towels. You never know if you're going to drip a drop of brake fluid, will take the paint off. You never know, or you're going to slip with a tool and scratch your tank. Cheap insurance. Cover everything. That's a great tip, by the way. Cover the whole bike if you can with the towels. Okay, 2 Allen bolts, the handlebar is off, and we're ready to pull the fork cap off. Once you loosen handlebar bolts, it's very nice how they do this. Instead of a cap socket, they have looks like a 1/2 inch socket, goes right in there. Very convenient. What happened here is these are under some spring tension. I don't want it to jump out and take my teeth out. Now I want to put it in slow enough that it doesn't all come up to the surface, because it's got to go down into the forks. Now what I always do, when I want to show this, I just put a dab of wheel bearing grease on those first threads. Just makes installing this a little bit easier. Some of the bikes you really have to press down on, especially if you've added spacers. All that's left is to install the handlebars and the cover for the middle and take it down off the lift. And all that's left is to lower the bike down a little bit. Make sure the kickstand's down, or so what we're looking for at this point in time is that old one bounce and no second bounce. Boy, that is a world better than it was. I think that unit might have been defective. But now I also have the choice of softening it up. I'm going to be going on some long touring ride. Hey, that was a day well spent. And one thing I always get my money's worth out of is any of the service manuals I have. They're all loaded with good information. And on YouTube, some of the videos that people share information, they keep our passion alive. Passion for old historic motorcycles. And I enjoy working on them. I enjoy riding them even more. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.